There's a specific kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being rejected. It happens because you start thinking differently. About life, about success, about what actually constitutes meaning. And suddenly, social spaces that used to feel normal start feeling inaccessible. Conversations that should be easy become performances. Questions that should be simple reveal unbridgeable distances. Gatherings that should feel like belonging, feel like watching a film you're not actually in. This isn't social anxiety. This isn't introversion. This is what happens when you can't pretend anymore that the way most people move through the world makes sense to you. I realized this wasn't abstract the night I stood in the corner at a friend's dinner party. Mid-November. Brooklyn apartment with those floor-to-ceiling windows that make the room feel bigger than it is. 20 people, maybe more. Wine in plastic cups because someone dropped the good glasses earlier. Everyone talking, laughing. Normal conversations about normal things. Careers, vacations, the kind of small victories that make life feel stable. And I felt like an alien. The conversation wasn't stupid. These were good people having genuine moments of connection. Someone telling a story about their promotion. Someone else planning a trip to Portugal. Real enthusiasm. Real joy. But I couldn't access it. My shoulders were tight the whole night, like I'd been holding a bag no one else could see. Someone, I think it was Sarah, turned to me and asked what I'd been thinking about lately. And I almost told the truth. Almost mentioned Notes from Underground, the Dostoevsky novel I'd been reading for the third time. Almost explained the idea about suffering and consciousness that had been consuming me for weeks. But I caught myself, because I knew what would happen, the micro-expression, the subject change. So I said something safe instead. Something about work deadlines, something forgettable. The whole time thinking about the underground man and his spite and his inability to be among people without performing. And went home at 10:30, feeling more alone than if I'd stayed home in the first place. Nietzsche had a name for this distance. The distance between those who move with the herd and those who've strayed too far to ever find their way back. And once you understand what he meant, you'll see it everywhere. A quick note before we go further. Nietzsche gets paraphrased a lot. I'm using the spirit of his ideas more than courtroom perfect citations. The philosophy matters more than the attribution debates. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. The question is, was he right? Nietzsche looked at human society and saw something most people miss, what he called herd morality, the instinct to follow, to conform, to surrender individual judgment to the group's collective wisdom. Not because people are stupid, but because the herd offers something precious, safety, belonging, the guarantee you'll never be truly alone. We like to think we're individuals, free thinkers, making our own choices based on our own values. But watch people closely. Watch how they form opinions, make decisions, choose what to value. And you'll see identical patterns repeating across millions of people who've never met. Same career paths, same life milestones, same fears, same dreams, same definitions of success. 22, finish college. 25, establish career. 28, relationship becomes serious. 30, marriage. 32, first child. 40, stability. 65, retirement. The template doesn't just influence people, it is how most people live. And here's what's strange about templates. They work precisely because nobody examines them. Nobody questions whether the timing makes sense or the sequence serves any actual purpose beyond the fact that everyone else follows it. They just exist as invisible infrastructure, like roads everyone drives on without asking who built them or where they actually lead. And the strangest part is how people defend the template most fiercely, right when they're most miserable following it, as if the universality of the suffering somehow validates it, makes it noble, makes it the only responsible way to be an adult in the world. The herd creates rules that keep everyone following the template. These aren't formal laws. They're social pressures, moral guidelines, unspoken agreements about what constitutes a good life. Get educated in approved fields. Find stable work that others understand. Build a family that looks like other families. Accumulate comfort that matches your peers. Don't deviate from the template. Don't stand out too much. Don't question the blueprint. The herd tells you this is wisdom, this is maturity, this is how responsible adults behave. And for most people, it works. It genuinely works. They find meaning in these patterns, real satisfaction in following the template, authentic joy in achieving the milestones everyone else is achieving. Nietzsche saw something else underneath. A massive system designed to protect mediocrity, to make average feel safe, to ensure nobody has to confront the possibility that they could be more. Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule. This isn't evil. It's not a conspiracy. It's evolutionary adaptation. Herds survive better than individuals. Conformity creates safety. Following the same template as everyone else means you'll never be truly alone, never be cast out, never have to navigate existence without the blueprint everyone else is using. The herd offers something precious, the guarantee that you'll always belong. When I first encountered this idea, something clicked. All those moments of feeling wrong, feeling broken, feeling like everyone else had received instructions I'd somehow lost. Wait, no. I had the instructions. Everyone gave me the same template. The problem was the template stopped making sense to me. The career path everyone said would bring fulfillment felt like slow suffocation. The relationship timeline everyone followed felt arbitrary when I tried to explain why those specific ages mattered. The accumulation everyone pursued felt like collecting things to avoid thinking about what the things were for. And I couldn't make myself believe the template was correct, no matter how much easier it would have been. But what happens when someone can't follow the herd anymore? When staying with the group feels like a kind of death? The herd doesn't tolerate deserters. Every person who leaves the template raises a terrible question for those who remain. If they can survive off the path, why am I still following it? The herd can't allow that question to spread, so it develops enforcement mechanisms, sophisticated systems for bringing strays back into formation. First comes concern. I remember this happening with my cousin David. We're at family Thanksgiving. He'd quit his consulting job to start teaching English in Vietnam. Good salary, good benefits, gone. My aunt can't help herself. "Are you okay, David? You seem different lately, like something's wrong." The implication being that different equals damaged. That deviation from the template is a symptom of something broken that needs fixing. Around the table, everyone starts offering concern disguised as advice. Have you thought about your retirement? What about health insurance? What if you want to settle down someday? David tries to explain that he's happy, that the work feels meaningful. They hear meaningful and think temporary crisis. They don't consider that what he's experiencing might be clarity. That's how the herd protects itself. First it worries, then it advises, then it punishes. When concern doesn't work, comes advice. Maybe you should be more realistic about your expectations. Maybe you're overthinking things. Maybe you should consider what everyone else is doing. The logic seems sound, collective wisdom, safety in numbers, thousands of years of human experience pointing toward these paths. Who is he to question it? What this really means, your individual perception threatens our collective agreement about reality. If David's right that the approved path leads nowhere meaningful, then everyone who followed it wasted their lives. They can't accept that possibility, so they pressure him to accept theirs. When subtle pressure fails, comes direct enforcement. Ridicule, dismissal, the kind of social punishment designed to make you question your own sanity. You think you're special? You think you're better than everyone else? You think you've figured out something that billions of people throughout history missed? This is the herd's most effective weapon. It transforms your inability to conform into a moral failing, into arrogance, into delusion. You're no longer someone with different needs. You're someone with a superiority complex. You're no longer seeing clearly. You're being judgmental. You're no longer honest about what doesn't work for you. You're being difficult. The social punishment escalates until returning seems easier than resisting. I've watched this happen to myself. Family members who used to respect my opinions now speak to me like I'm going through a phase, like I'll grow out of this strange period of questioning and settle into proper adulthood. Friends who used to seek my perspective now change the subject when I speak. Or worse, they listen with that patient smile you give someone whose thoughts you're tolerating rather than engaging. I didn't become worse. I became harder to categorize, harder to predict, harder to keep in formation. The enforcement mechanism operates on a simple principle: difference is danger. Because if one person can build a life outside the agreed-upon template and survive, maybe even thrive, then all those people who sacrifice their uniqueness for security start wondering if they made a mistake. The herd can't allow that doubt to spread, so it exiles the different, marginalizes the strange, punishes the particular. And sometimes the enforcement works. People break and crawl back wearing their difference like shame. Here's what keeps me awake. Actually, I don't know how to say this without it sounding defensive. What if I don't know. What if I tell myself I left because I saw through the system, but really I couldn't handle people? Being seen? I don't know. This doubt, this fracture in the narrative I tell myself, it doesn't resolve. Maybe some people mistake alienation for insight. Maybe they lose shared language without earning a deeper one. Maybe they leave the herd too early, before they've actually developed the capacity to build something meaningful outside the consensus. And maybe I'm one of them. There are nights when I wonder if I'm seeing clearly, or if I'm performing a philosophical version of sour grapes. Convincing myself I chose isolation, when really, I couldn't figure out how to connect. Making my inability to fit in mean something so it hurts less. Turning my confusion into philosophy so I don't have to call it what it might actually be. Fear. The easy narrative is to call them sheep, to feel superior for seeing what they can't see, to imagine you've woken up while everyone else sleeps. But that's exactly the trap Nietzsche warned about. The reactive outsider who mistakes his inability to connect for enlightenment. What if I'm calling them sheep because I couldn't figure out how to be part of the herd? Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. Nietzsche understood something that doesn't get quoted enough. Most people who leave the herd don't become creators. They become bitter, reactive, defining themselves by what they reject rather than what they build. Understanding without creation collapses into resentment. The exile who defines himself only by what he's rejected hasn't actually built anything. He's negation with a philosophy degree, criticizing the herd's choices while making none of his own, analyzing the system while contributing nothing, standing outside and feeling superior, while producing nothing of value. Nietzsche feared the reactive outsider more than the conformist, because at least the conformist builds something: a family, a community, a life that matters to the people in it. The bitter outsider builds nothing. He watches, he judges, he feels misunderstood, and he calls it enlightenment. I made a video recently about this exact trap, about how understanding your problem can become more comfortable than solving it, how the seeking itself becomes the prison, because that's what's waiting for anyone who leaves without knowing why. You can spend your entire life analyzing why you don't fit in, studying philosophy, reading Nietzsche, watching videos at 3 a.m., and call it depth, when really you're avoiding the harder work of building something that matters. For Nietzsche, distance was never the achievement. Creation was. Sometimes creation is a book. Sometimes it's a way of treating people. Sometimes it's a small life you build carefully. Sometimes it's just one thing that didn't exist before you decided it should. Distance was the price you paid for the space to create something genuinely new. If you're isolated without creating, you're paying the price without earning the privilege. And I wonder, late at night, staring at my ceiling, what have I actually created? Pages of notes nobody will read? Insights that die in my head? A philosophy of isolation that serves mainly to justify being isolated? And I wonder if even this, turning my doubt into philosophical inquiry, analyzing my isolation with Nietzsche quotes, is another way of protecting myself, of explaining instead of risking being misunderstood, of making my loneliness mean something so it hurts less. The fracture sits there, constant companion to all the philosophy. Is isolation producing insight or protecting me from the risk of being truly known? I have this friend, call him Michael. Michael followed every checkpoint on the template exactly. Good college, stable career in finance, married at 28, kid at 30, house in Westchester with a yard and a mortgage and a basketball hoop over the garage. Every box checked. The life I'm supposed to look at and see limitation, see conformity, see the death of individuality. And here's the thing that bothers me. Michael seems genuinely happy. Last month, we met at this coffee shop in Grand Central, one of those standing room only places where everyone's rushing to catch trains. Michael ordered a regular coffee, black. I got an espresso because I'd barely slept. He showed me photos on his phone. His daughter Emma, maybe 5 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding up a drawing she made of their family. 4 stick figures, all holding hands, their dog in the corner. And Michael's showing me this photo with the kind of aliveness in his eyes I feel when I'm reading Dostoevsky at 3 a.m. and something finally clicks. Real enthusiasm, real meaning, real engagement with life. He tells me about coaching Emma's soccer team, about teaching her to ride a bike last weekend, about family dinners where they go around the table saying one good thing that happened that day. And I'm listening to him describe these small rhythms that supposedly trap people in mediocrity, these template moments everyone follows. Watching his face light up when he talks about his daughter, asking him to read the same book for the 15th night in a row, because that's their thing now, their ritual. And something about the specificity of it, the way he remembers it's the 15th night, the way he says our thing, like it's the most valuable currency in the world, makes me realize he's not performing contentment or making peace with limitation. He's genuinely built something that makes him feel whole. And I'm sitting there thinking, your life is a template, a complete surrender to what everyone does. But also thinking, you sleep well at night, you have people who need you, you're building something real while I'm what? Reading alone at 2 a.m., convinced my isolation proves I'm seeing clearly, calling my inability to connect philosophical depth. I stared at that photo for, I don't know how long. Emma drew her father into her world. She sees him as the center of something that matters. When's the last time anyone drew me into their world? When's the last time I was the center of something that mattered to someone other than myself? This is the part I don't want to admit. Sometimes the template doesn't look like prison. Sometimes it looks like home. Sometimes the herd isn't blind. Sometimes they see different things worth seeing. Things like a daughter who runs to you when you pick her up from school, a partner who knows how you take your coffee, a community that shows up when something goes wrong. Michael has those things. I have philosophy books, and the conviction that I'm somehow seeing more clearly. The lonely one offers his hand too quickly to whomever he encounters. Nietzsche understood the envy, the way isolation makes you desperate for connection, even while you're convinced connection isn't possible on your terms. The way you reach for people, and pull backs and reach again, always uncertain whether the problem is them or you. What if some people are genuinely built for community? What if their contentment in template lives isn't limitation, but fit? What if Michael's happiness isn't delusion, but an actual match between his nature and the life he's built? And what if my inability to find that contentment isn't superiority? Just different wiring, different needs, different architecture? Michael can't be me any more than I can be him. What if the isolation I'm calling freedom is the price of my particular nervous system, dressed up in philosophy to make it feel chosen rather than imposed? Before we left, Michael asked if I wanted to come to Emma's birthday party next month. I said I'd check my schedule. We both knew I wouldn't come. The envy sneaks in when you're not looking. Sitting across from Michael, watching him show me photos of his daughter's birthday party last year, surrounded by family and friends who all showed up because they genuinely care. Part of me thinks, you've surrendered your potential to become something unique. And part of me thinks, you've built something I don't know how to build, and maybe never will. Both thoughts feel true, and neither has an answer. Once you see the herd's patterns, unknowing becomes impossible. You start noticing things. No, that's too clean. It doesn't happen in stages like I'm describing it. It's messier than that. One day you're in a conversation and you realize you're performing, and you don't know when it started. Someone's telling you about their promotion and you're making the right sounds. Congratulations, that's amazing, you deserve it. While thinking, part of you is already tired and you don't know why yet. You watch people repeat opinions they've never examined, pursue goals they've never questioned, build lives according to blueprints designed by people who died centuries ago. Someone says they want to find themselves by traveling, but they're following the same route as millions of others, posting the same photos, having the same revelations on the same mountaintops. Someone talks about their career ambitions, but when you ask why they want those specific things, they can't answer. Because the ambition came from outside, from what successful people are supposed to want. Someone explains their life choices, and you hear them using phrases from their parents, their culture, their peer group. Words that entered their mouth without passing through their mind. And you can't unknow this. The machinery becomes visible. Every conversation feels like watching a play where everyone knows their lines except you. You lose the ability to participate normally. Everything feels scripted. Someone complains about their job. You suggest they leave. They explain why that's impossible. The mortgage, the stability, the resume gap. All the reasons the consensus provides for staying in formation. And you realize, sometimes conversation isn't a problem-solving space. It's a permission space. And you start seeing people as, I don't want to say sheep, but you see them following patterns they've never examined, repeating opinions they've absorbed, pursuing goals they've never questioned. And I say that like I'm above it. I'm not. I do it too, just in different rooms. You lose the comfort of shared assumptions. Where the herd sees obvious truths, you see questionable constructs. Where they see natural order, you see arbitrary agreements that became invisible through repetition. Marriage, career success, home ownership, retirement planning. All the milestones that supposedly mark a life well lived. You can't accept them as self-evidently good anymore. Which means you can't celebrate them properly when people achieve them. Then you lose the people. They stop calling, stop including you in plans. My college roommate Jake stopped inviting me to his poker nights. We'd been playing together for 6 years. Same group. Same Tuesday nights. Then one week, no text. I waited until Wednesday to ask, casual. Hey man, poker tonight? He called instead of texting back. Look, Sarah mentioned you seemed kind of, I don't know, disconnected last time. Like you weren't really there. And some of the guys felt, I don't know how to say this, judged. I tried to remember what I'd said. Something about the game. Something about their jobs. I honestly couldn't remember being judgmental. Maybe these nights aren't really your thing anymore, Jake said. And the thing is, he wasn't wrong. The nights weren't my thing. But having him say it, having him be the one to exclude me instead of me choosing to leave, that's different. I stared at my phone after we hung up, because losing the invitation hurt more than I thought it would, even though I probably wouldn't have gone anyway. The worst loss, the one that sits in your chest like a stone, you lose the possibility of being fully understood. Because understanding requires shared language, shared context, shared frameworks of meaning. And when you've developed a way of seeing that exists outside the consensus's reality, you're speaking a dialect nobody else knows. You can translate, you can simplify, you can try to build bridges. But the full depth of what you see, the complete truth of how you experience existence, that dies in translation. Every time. Last week, I tried to explain to my sister why I quit my job. She asked the reasonable question, "What's your plan?" And I tried to explain that the question itself assumes a framework I can't operate within anymore. She looked at me the way you look at someone who's speaking English, but somehow making no sense. "Okay, but what are you going to do for money?" She wasn't being obtuse. We were speaking different languages. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. You're dancing to music nobody else hears, and explaining the rhythm doesn't let them hear it. Was gaining this perspective worth losing the ability to be known? The herd offers stability. Exile offers uncertainty, but they're not equally risky. The herd offers genuine community at the price of unexplored selfhood. You'll always have people around you, people who understand you in the ways that matter to them, people who share your context and your language and your assumptions about what life should be. You'll never be truly alone. You'll also never know who you might have been if you'd followed your own strange architecture instead of the approved blueprints. Exile offers the potential for authenticity, with no guarantee. You get to think your own thoughts, build your own values, create your own meaning. You get the raw experience of being genuinely alive in a way the template can't access. But you also get isolation, misunderstanding, the constant weight of being incomprehensible to the people around you. And here's what nobody tells you. Most people who leave don't become Nietzsche. They become resentful, unmoored, convinced their distance proves they're right, while building nothing. Exile can produce genius, or it can produce bitterness that mistakes itself for insight. The ratio isn't in your favor. But there's something worth saying here. Something I keep avoiding because it sounds too simple. Because some people can't breathe in rooms full of people saying things they don't mean. The air gets thin. The walls close in. Being alone isn't the problem. Pretending isn't lonely is the problem. That's not noble. It's not superior. It's constitutional. Michael can't be me any more than I can be him. His contentment in the template isn't limitation. It's genuine fit between his nature and the life he's built. My inability to find that contentment isn't seeing clearly. It's different architecture. We're operating different systems. Some days, standing in my apartment, surrounded by books most people will never read, thinking thoughts most people will never think, I feel rich, alive, grateful for whatever accident of birth or experience made me unable to settle for the approved life. Other days, watching Michael's daughter draw pictures of her family, watching people move through the world with easy belonging, with natural connection, with the simple pleasure of being understood. I feel exiled, broken, punished for something I didn't choose. The difference between the herd and the strays isn't moral superiority. It's constitutional incompatibility. Some people are genuinely built for the warmth of the herd. Others are built for the cold clarity of distance. Neither is better. They're different frequencies. You discover which one you operate on. Usually the hard way. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. Amor fati, love your fate. Nietzsche's solution to the unbearable weight of being who you are. Loving the isolation that comes with seeing differently. loving the distance that comes with thinking for yourself, loving even the doubt about whether you're seeing clearly or performing intellectual distance, loving all of it because it's yours. Maybe the goal isn't to fit back in. Maybe it's to learn how to speak without translating yourself into someone else, to build something that matters even if nobody understands why it matters to you. Sometimes what you build is an object. Sometimes it's a way of speaking that stops apologizing, to stop waiting for the moment when isolation finally produces enough insight to justify its cost and accept that it might never balance. Maybe the only proof this wasn't avoidance is whether something exists tomorrow that didn't exist before. A page, a gesture, a sentence you finally say without translating it. Something you built because the isolation gave you space, not because it gave you an excuse. I went to another dinner party last week. Different apartment, same kind of people, same kind of conversations. This time I didn't even try to participate. I stood in the corner with a beer I wasn't drinking and just watched, like an anthropologist or an exile. They weren't shallow, they were alive. I just couldn't enter it. Someone asked if I was okay. I said I was tired, which was true, but not in the way they meant. I can't go back. The herd's patterns are too obvious now, the machinery too visible. So I'm left here, free from the consensus's limitations, isolated by that same freedom. Does understanding this make us free? Or does it simply teach us how to live with being alone, without lying to ourselves about what it costs? Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe that's enough.